Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, the Pedialyte Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. I'm Russ Joy. That's Anthony SanFilippo. Donde está Bundy? Bundy is currently on assignment. He will not be here today, much to the chagrin of many of the Delaware Valley, but we
on
are
assignment.
He's on assignment. We have a lot going on today's episode. More rumors coming out of Russia around Matvei Michkov. He finally goes on the record to a Russian outlet. His head coach at SKA St. Petersburg goes on the record. We'll get to all that. Plus, I don't know if you knew this or not. I know it feels like a long time since we last saw the Flyers take the ice. But there's playoff hockey going on. And so we're going to talk about the conference finals, which have now gotten underway. I stayed up late for last night's game, man. I don't know if you did as well, but we'll get there in a second. But Ant, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Russell. I mean, it's baseball season for me. Not that I'm not paying attention to the Stanley Cup playoffs, because I am. And actually had some time to watch that Dallas-Edmonton game last night. It was my daughter graduated from college yesterday. So I actually missed the Phillies game during the day yesterday. And when I got home, it was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'm gonna watch some hockey tonight, and watch the game last night. So it was great. It was great to actually sit there and watch a full hockey game last night. It was good.
How about it?
Was good. Yeah. It was
Last
good.
night's game was a lot of fun. I do want to get to the playoffs. Do we start with the Flyers or do we start with the?
I got to answer Kyle's question first. Kyle Adams is asking if my fiance is still pissed off at my haircut, and the answer is yes, but not as pissed off as she was before.
Oh, okay. It's progress.
Yeah, it was progress.
You can believe in.
It is progress. Yeah.
I mean, it's an election year, so having progress in any way is a good thing, right? Isn't that what the people say? Right?
Yeah.
Hope you can believe in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, look, we have, I have to tell you, Ant, the Mishkov thing has taken the hockey world by storm. How do I know? Because over on the Joy Media account, which people should go follow on YouTube, maybe in a podcast soon, I put up a video just opining on Mishkov. And I think the title of it was something to the effect of, is Matvei Michkov joining the Flyers soon? Something like that. And it got a really nice number. And I thought, man, there's a lot of appetite for this. Now, we know that. Bundy knows that. I think anybody who cares about the Philadelphia Flyers are aware of that. And they're aware that there have been a lot of rumors going around. And sometimes you kind of have this internal discussion as a team where we go, is this worth talking about every day? Is this worth talking about every week? Are we wasting time on a guy who might not end up over here, and maybe everybody just got themselves a little bit too worked up into a frenzy? And I always come back to, if it's what the people want, we are the people's podcast. We have to provide the people with exactly what they want, and what they seem to want is an update on Matvei Michkov. So, Ant, can you confirm that Mishkov is on his way to the U.S. right now?
Cannot.
Okay. Can you confirm he is currently in Russia?
Well, I cannot. I mean, I don't know. I assume
so
he
you're
is.
Saying there's a chance.
I assume he's in Russia, right? But I cannot confirm his absolute whereabouts as we are recording this episode. No.
And I'm glad that somebody knows. Scott Walker on YouTube says the Russ Stash lives. I have brought back the Russ Stash in the hopes that it brings the good luck and Matvei Michkov ends up over here. Now, it will come off in the event that we get confirmation that he will be rejoining St. Petersburg.
Andrew's got a better line, though.
Yeah, that your hair is better than my stash.
There you go.
Andrew's just jelly. I think it's just a little bit jelly. By the way, Allison, congratulations to Allison's daughter. Graduated from kindergarten yesterday.
Yeah. It's a big step.
I think the whole idea of kindergarten graduations is both hilarious and so alarming on so many levels. Like the way that they go above and beyond. And I can tell you that there's a school district near me that does signing day for kids that are going from pre-K to kindergarten. And they make the big thing out of it, which I think on one hand is cute. And on the other hand, I'm like, what are we doing here? It's kindergarten, but it is fun. It's fun stuff, Ant. When's the last time you had a kid in kindergarten? Was the world in black and white or?
2006, I guess.
That's not so bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all.
I think it was.
At all.
6 or 7. I don't remember if Andrew started. Well, he turned 5. I think it was 06. No, it was 07 because his birthday was too late. Yeah, so 07 was the last time I had a kid in kindergarten.
Josh White checks in and says, just wait until Ant grows out a mullet. That's great stuff.
There's a great photo of me from when COVID was happening and we were locked in our homes. You've seen it. It's our Slack chat photo.
That's right. Yeah, your hair's like oddly long in that. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and I went with
it's weird. I don't like you. I don't like you with long hair.
I went with the Tiger King stash and goatee.
There's something wrong with you.
There was
genuinely
wild.
something wrong.
Yeah, it was wild.
By the way, Sean C thinks that Mishkov is already in the U.S. Eric H asks if he's currently living in your basement. I don't know if he means my basement or your basement. Can't confirm he is not in my basement.
Probably more room in yours.
Oh, that is definite. That is for sure.
Yeah,
I have a bigger basement and it has another kitchen and a bathroom and everything. So he's got essentially an in-law suite down here if he wants, but I don't think he's coming over here. Josh thinks that he's hiding in Voorhees playing foosball with Jonesy. So go back to that. But okay, Scott Walker with breaking news. Mishkov has been spotted grabbing Dippin' Dots in Anaheim with Cutter.
Oh no,
not great. Yeah. There it goes. It's all over, guys. Not good. James Bond using some MI6 intel. Mishkov is hidden away at a motel on Route 73. I thought he said Motel 6, but at a motel on 73. So I'm glad that there are people who are joining us today. We put out a 10-minute notice, and I will tell everybody at home right now, we're in the process of trying to figure out a way to bring this show to a somewhat regular schedule where we might actually pick a day of the week and say, this is going to be the day for the summer. This is the day, this is the time. Probably won't happen, but we're trying. I think Ant and I have had this conversation now for 6 years where it's like, we're going to make it happen this year. This is the year that we're going to do it. We're by God, instead of it just being pick and choose, throw darts at a board, we're actually going to do it. And I don't think so.
Bundissimo is the issue with that regular thing.
Well, he's out changing lives for the better. You and I are just a couple of jamokes who do jobs that have an impact in different ways. But Bundy's actually out there like effectively saving lives. So
yeah,
we give him some grace. Donald says he saw Mishkov at the Wawa in Marlton, and he was surprised that Wawa sells pizza now. So listen, a lot of sightings out there. All right. I guess one other thing that we need to. Mishkov, after eating at the Dutch place, has moved out to live with the Pennsylvania Dutch. He has a barn raising tomorrow. I love that this should be a new thing. William thinks that he's in Graceland hiding out with Elvis. Both are still alive.
Wow.
Eric H. thinks that he's working the Thomas the Train ride on Wonderland Pier. So we are. David Waitman thinks that he's probably in the seedy side of Delco, a.k.a. Essington, near the airport. Josh calls out what I tweeted last week, that he was actually seen at the Wawa in Phoenixville getting a hash brown on his burrito. Zacho thinks that he was in Pottstown getting cheesesteaks at Gazzo's. They got a brick and mortar. You have to come up for a Gazzo's cheesesteak. It's something.
As much as you promote them, you think they would be a sponsor of the show?
I don't know if they need to sponsor, man. Their stuff's so good. They should, but maybe we'll have a conversation with them at some point. That'd actually be a good place for a live show.
But no, listen, I do think it's worth talking about the interview, or if that's what you want to call it. The quotes from Mishkov, and I think he didn't answer any questions. Really, I mean, the questions that were asked of him, he gave non-answers.
Do you want to role play it? We could read it. Do you want to role play it? I have it pulled up. Do you have it pulled up? I can drop it in the chat for you.
I got it. I got it.
Do you want to be the reporter or do you want to be Mishkov?
I'll be the reporter because
right,
I know you like to hear yourself talk, so you can be the longer answers. So I will ask the questions. All right. How's the off season going?
Great. I've already had time to rest a little. Now I've got to start preparing for new season. I work in the gym, gradually increasing load, full of strength, energy, and desire to show everything capable of.
Yeah, that's good. In North America, they write that you can leave SKA and go to Philadelphia due to bad relations with Roman Rotenberg. Is it so?
I don't know where such rumors come from. Apparently, someone in America decided everything could be seen and heard better from there, but this is not so. Roman Borisovich and I have excellent relationship. We are constantly in touch, talking. He gives a lot of practical and valuable advice. We have complete mutual understanding, both with club and with him personally, which I appreciate.
Now, there are a lot of rumors circulating on the internet about where you will continue your career. How do you react to them?
I don't pay attention. My job is to be 100% ready and play my best hockey in any situation. I try not to be distracted by reading the news. This only hinders me from fully preparing for season. There you go. That was a dramatic reading of the quotes. Dramatic reading. Huh? I put the Russ in Russian. Huh? Huh? See that? Huh? Yeah, you get it. You get it. So, okay, let's break it down a little bit because, and Roman Rotenberg also had quotes today. I'm going to see if I can pull those up because he's been asked a bunch of times in the last week or two about what's happening. Because for those who aren't following, SKA St. Petersburg has gone through some roster upheaval. And the coach, Rotenberg, said a couple days ago they were going to be sending out different players, bringing in different players. And I think the idea was that they would be the hint, I guess, that people were trying to pick up on was they're going to bring in forwards because they need to replace Mishkov if last week's rumors have any merit. And the idea, I guess, is that if you look at it now, they've brought in 4 forwards. And so now today's scuttlebutt is, they brought in 4 forwards because they're definitely preparing for life without Matvei Michkov. Rotenberg had said previously that they've put a lot into developing him, which is kind of weird because they've loaned him out twice, and that they put resources into him. So he didn't want to confirm or deny the reports that there might be a conversation ongoing between the clubs or between the third party. It's a lot.
It is a lot. Look, and this is what I can say at this point. Like, I feel like the conversations that are being had about the potential to leave Russia and come over are legit. That was an ambulance flying by.
That's the sound of the police.
Yeah, that was an ambulance.
But it's actually the Russian police coming to send you for a year of military service. You didn't know that, did you?
They're coming to get me.
They think your name is Boris SanFilippo.
Yeah, I know. I do think
SanFilippovich.
I do think the conversations have been had, and I do think that there is talk. I don't think that this is a BS rumor that he's having these conversations with SKA. But I think there are so many moving parts that are kind of attached to this. We just assume, I think a lot of times in these conversations about contracts and, who signs what or whatever, that it's just some kind of template that they follow, right? And they just sign this and we're done, right? But in reality, there are so many, there's so much minutia that goes into getting a contract done, getting into a contract signed, and then getting out of one. There's even more that goes into it, right? So there's so much that has to happen. Obviously, I think there's a little bit that has to do with Mishkov's family, making sure that they're taken care of, and that they can feel comfortable with whatever situation Matvei has. So there's all that has to take place. I do think we'll get some kind of clarity soon. I don't think this is something that's going to drag on for the summer. I think this is something we'll get some.
Do you think we'll have resolution by the draft? Because if you remember, St. Petersburg's president said at the end of April that they expected to have something by June, official word by June, which also happens to align with the end of June is the NHL draft. One would assume that the Flyers would like to have some clarity on this before they go draft some guys and before free agency. One would assume, because that could alter their plans at least a little bit if he comes over.
Yeah, I would think that it would happen we'll hear something within the next month. Where I remain hedging and where I remain 50-50 on this whole thing is when he comes over. I think if we sat here, if you asked me 2 different questions and you said to me, "Ant, is Matvei Michkov going to be on the Flyers for opening night?" I would say that's where I'm 50-50. I'm just not sure. If you said to me, "Ant, will Matvei Michkov play for the Flyers during the 24-25 season?" I'm a lot closer to 80% on that one. I think that that's more of a realistic belief. I think that there's a real good chance of him having the same kind of deal as Fedotov last year, where you play out the season, and once the season's over, then you can come over. I think that one is almost closer to. I'm not going to say it's a given. It's not a gimme. Nothing's ever a gimme with Russia, right? But I think that that's more realistic. But I will not rule out the fact that something can happen here in the next month, and he could sign with the Flyers as ELC, get out of that contract in the KHL, sign his ELC with the Flyers, and be, part of the opening night roster. I think that there's some things that probably have to be finalized there as well. Is he getting a guaranteed NHL job? Are they going to want him to go down and play in the AHL for a little bit, just to kind of get acclimated? And is the Russian team okay with that? Like, there's so many different aspects to this. So we'll see. But I do think I don't think that this is all a bunch of BS. And so, like, when you hear Mishkov's answers about, it's just somebody making something up in America. And I know that was more of a response to the bad relationship with the coach than it was to a possibility of coming over here. But just kind of talking about rumors, not paying attention to what's out there. I think that's a little bit disingenuous. I think that there is stuff to talk about here. And I think everybody's kind of intimately aware of what's going on. It's just they got to be careful with what how it's approached, what's said, what's not said, because there are certain things that the Flyers cannot do, cannot say, because he's currently under contract with another team in another league. And so you got to be very, very careful with all this stuff.
Well, it's crazy too, because like when you think about it, there are a lot of things, like you were saying, that are kind of going on behind the scenes. And I speculated over on the Joy Media YouTube channel earlier this week that, like, if you were going to try to figure out a way to make it happen, right? There are a few ways that you could do it. A lot of people have been trying to do the math on, like, the ELC, build in a bunch of bonuses where Mishkov would essentially be guaranteed these bonuses. Then he could turn around and pay off his deal, right? But you are still limited within the constraints of, like, what the NHL will allow on an ELC and bonus structure. And there is, I think the provision's actually in the KHL contract about having to pay back his deal as part of termination. Let's just, like, address the big elephant in the room. There are other ways that somebody who has a vested interest in this on the Flyers side could potentially get in touch with somebody who has a vested interest on the St. Petersburg side. And there is perhaps a way that some intermediaries could get involved, and there could be a little bit of shuffling here and a little bit of shuffling there. Now, we won't speculate on that because we would never do such a thing. We don't speculate here on Snow The Goalie. All right, we don't do that. However, if you're an intelligent human being who reads between the lines, I'm pretty sure you understand that, like, there are ways that a deal could be reached here. I do think that the big thing is for Mishkov to come over, he has to play for the Flyers. And there was I think a quasi mistranslated quote. Now, we all know Russ is learning Russian for when Mishkov comes over. It wasn't supposed to be this year. But there was a slight misinterpretation of a quote, I believe from Rotenberg, from the head coach, that said if he wasn't on the top line. And what it actually was is if he wasn't on the top link, like as in the top level, as in playing for the Flyers. Not that St. Petersburg would effectively demand that Matvei Michkov is on a wing playing on the top line for the Philadelphia Flyers in the 2024-25 season. Rather, that if he's going to go over, if we're going to give up on this guy that we have invested a lot of time and energy and resources in, which again I say is questionable at best because they've loaned him twice, that he needs to play at the NHL level. They aren't going to part ways with him and have him pass up on playing, even if it's on loan with another team in the KHL. They're not going to pass up on that to have him come over and play for the Phantoms. And in fairness, if you're Matvei Michkov, and you would have been probably a top 2 pick had you not been a Russian player, the idea of coming over to play in the A cannot be enticing in any way, shape, or form.
No, and I don't think the Flyers would do that per se, other than maybe just to kind of do like a quick little acclimation kind of thing, just to make sure. Like if you don't know, right? Yeah. But the reality of it is the KHL is the second best league in the world behind the NHL. So if he could play in the KHL, he doesn't need to play in the AHL. I think that's basically what that what they're saying with that, right? I mean, this is a better league, and that's understandable. I get it. So yeah,
I'm going to throw out an idea here. I know Scott Walker was joking here about like breaking news. Matvei Michkov signs 10-year deal with Wawa, which now has pizza. If Mishkov comes over, he will undoubtedly have sponsorship offers. Now, I get that like traditionally when you look at having somebody partner with a player, especially a young player, it's probably preferable if they speak English. But like there is going to be such a what was your word over on Crossing Broadcast the one day? Furor about it. There's going to be furor around it, but I still don't like that word all that much. Yeah. But there's going to be so much excitement around this guy that there are going to be at least local businesses, maybe not national brands, but there are going to be a lot of local businesses that are going to look to kind of glom on because in truth, this will be the first time the Flyers will have had a guy that you could theoretically build a campaign around, that you can actually say is like face of the franchise. He's going to have ridiculously high expectations when he gets over here, whatever year that is. But people are going to look at him as this generational talent and moreover, are going to look at him as being the face of this era of Flyers hockey. It won't be Sean Couturier. People love Travis Konecny. I don't think they look at him as having the kind of ceiling that people seem to believe Matvei Michkov is going to have. He's going to be the guy. So while it was a joke on Scott's part, I do think that there is something to the idea that like there could be sponsorship dollars coming his way. So maybe if you're like looking for the workaround for him to pay off his contract, maybe he uses the ELC money to pay out of his deal. But I think there will be other revenue sources for him when he does come over. And if it is this year, I wouldn't be shocked, Ant.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I mean, and that's all well and good. I mean, there's ways, even without that, to kind of, get that money over there. I mean, there are different possibilities that are second and third, fourth-handed ways to get money to him if necessary. It happens it's happened with other Russian players as well. Nobody will really ever talk about it publicly, but there are ways. I did want to answer this question from earlier. I did think it was worth it because I just wanted to say something about it. So this is from BDJ.
Ooh, this is a good one. I'll add this to the poll.
Yeah. It says it's August 15th. Mishkov is a Flyer. Celebrini is a Shark. Who's the Rookie of the Year favorite? And my answer to that is always it's going to be the Canadian player regardless. And I say that because I believe there is a little bit of a bias in that regard, unless if they're closer to even, right? Or even if Mishkov is a little bit ahead of Celebrini. But the only way Mishkov would be the favorite for Rookie of the Year is if he gets off to a great start and leaves Celebrini in the dust, or Celebrini gets hurt. I mean, there's other players that could always get brought into the conversation. You never know what's going to happen. But the reality of it is that it's a campaign that happens every year in that certain guys get talked about enough that the people who end up voting see the names so often and so frequently, it's in their head. Well, it's got to be Celebrini. I don't want to be the guy who puts a vote out that's not Celebrini. Like I'll give a perfect example because you know me, I don't give a shit. But I'm serious. Like I'm a voter, right? I'm a voter for end of year awards in the NHL. I'm one of the voters. And a couple years ago, I didn't vote for Connor McDavid to win the Hart Trophy, and I got killed because we put all the writers in the PHWA, we have an agreement that all of our votes become public once the awards are announced, right?
Yeah.
So everybody gets to see who we all voted for. And I was one of, I want to say 5 people who didn't vote for Connor McDavid. And the people who came after me on Twitter was like, oh my God, you guys are, how can you not vote? You don't know anything about hockey. You should have your vote pulled, blah, 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 blah. And I think that what I'm trying to get to is I don't care what the influence is from other writers, from other broadcasters, from the stories that are written that are out there. I'm going to go off of what I deem as the justification for my vote. Okay.
Sure.
But I do think there are so many people who vote who are afraid to take on that criticism, right, from the public if they go against the grain, and they're just going to vote with what everybody else seems to be voting for. And so that is shaped by this story on this guy and this story on this guy and this interview and this whatever. And so you see so much of it that unless it's an overwhelming slam dunk, like we should really analyze these guys and make a determination on our own and not worry about what stories are out there. But I think too many people are influenced by it. And so therefore you always have that. I think it's a Canadian bias first and North American bias second, and then the European guys unfortunately come in beyond that. And I think that a lot of times they get screwed over because they're not considered, because they don't get all the pub that the North American guys do.
I think you're right, but you know what, Ant? I think there is something to be said for the belief that having a rookie that plays on a big market team like Mishkov would, you talk about whether I wouldn't call it a human interest story in the same way that Fedotov was, but it is still going to be one of those things that people are going to talk about like, wow, they got a Russian player out, and a Russian player who's just entering the very beginning of his career and is like very highly thought of and was a high pick. I do think that that's going to kind of play into it. And ultimately, having one guy on the West Coast and a guy on the East Coast going head-to-head for the award could end up being one of those things. I think that there's always a little bit of bias. I agree there's a Canadian bias, but I do think that there's also like the East Coast bias. I think that a lot of times if you play in a big market, you're going to get more games on TV. You're probably going to have a bigger spotlight shown on you. More people are going to be able to watch your game. And that could maybe influence things. We do have to keep in mind, though, he's going to be young. Like, if he comes over this year, which is a humongous big if, he's going to be really young. He'll still be 19, right? So the Flyers haven't had an impact, depending on how you want to call it, an impact teenager on the team since, when Sean Couturier made it on the big team, right? He was 18 when he made the roster, though, right, Couturier? So it's just an interesting thing. And I think, again, this is why so many people are excited about the possibility. And we're not going to tell people not to get excited. It's just a matter of you do have to remain realistic here that there are so many things that could change between the time that we record and the time that, like, somebody hears this, say, like, 6 hours from now, or they listen to it on Saturday morning, or they hold off until Memorial Day so they can sit around the JBL flip speaker out at their cookout and have us serenade their party with the dulcet tones of our voices, and like, a lot can change. Hell, by the time somebody listens to this, he might already be here. We just don't know. There is no way to know.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. I think that as long as they have an answer by the draft, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they will have it. I think they'll know by the draft. I think that's part of this, is that way they know how to approach their off season.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. So just to answer Ed's question. So it was 2 years ago, Ed. He asked, Ed Coleman asked, who did I vote for instead of McDavid? So we're talking about the 21-22 season, not last season, 2 seasons ago. I voted for Shesterkin to win the Hart Trophy. I felt that he was so impactful, even though he was goalie and goalies get the Vezina. We don't get the vote for the Vezina. So, like, to me, my argument is I will vote for a goalie for the Hart Trophy if I feel that the goalie is the most impactful player to his team, because I don't get a vote for the Vezina Trophy that's voted on by general managers in the sport. So, as a result, I vote for the goalie if I think they fit. And so that in that year, I voted for Shesterkin and not McDavid to win the MVP. And just so,
by the way, over on YouTube, I closed the poll. 77% of our viewers believe that Matvei Michkov would win Rookie of the Year. But I do have to point out that somebody did raise a pretty good point over in the chat, and I hate to acknowledge it, but Asphalt Cowboy's right. Cutter Gauthier, in theory, could also be part of that.
Could well be part of it.
Could well, and I don't think Cutter Gauthier is going to be a bad player.
Yeah,
he's maybe a bitch, but he's not. Maybe a little bit pretentious.
Yeah,
just maybe a little bit problematic.
And just
but
so
not a bad hockey player.
Just so everybody knows, I mean, I might as well put these out now because I didn't put these out on Crossing Broad or anything. But my vote for the Hart Trophy this year was Nikita Kucherov. I had McDavid third. For all those McDavid fans who are wondering where he's at, I had him third behind Kucherov and McKinnon. Quinn Hughes for the Norris Trophy. Brock Faber was my pick for Calder, not Connor Bedard. I thought Faber played a lot more, had a better season than Bedard, but I think, whatever. I went with Jacob Slavin for the Lady Byng and Barkov for the Selke Trophy. Those were my picks for the trophies that I got to vote on this year.
There was a comment that I saw over here. I think this has been asked twice. So, Ann, I'm going to defer this one to you. Sean C. asks, can you speak to Danny Briere's behavior during the St. Petersburg, like in discussing a St. Petersburg player versus the newly stepped down Don Waddle's behavior, very outspoken? I don't know what that's exactly in reference to.
Yeah, I don't know what he's referring to as far as behavior. I mean, I look at it and say that, I think Danny's handled this situation about as well as he possibly can, considering what all's happening with Russian players right now trying to get over and play in the U.S., especially Russian players with a name in Russia. And so I think Danny has handled it about as well as he can.
I found it.
Did Danny say something that I missed?
No, it wasn't Danny. It was Waddle. So,
okay, go ahead.
So apparently St. Petersburg had said they wouldn't consider releasing Alex Nikishin for even $100 million US, which came after the now former Hurricanes GM said the team would make an effort to bring over the 22-year-old star defender. So that's what it was. So there, I guess, is your difference in protocol and operating procedure. The Flyers are kind of going, I don't know. Like, he's the player. Danny Briere said on the French language podcast a few days ago, like, I don't know. Maybe we'll see if he ever comes over. I don't know. You don't know. Je ne sais pas, But Waddle, on the other hand, is kind of like, we're going to do everything we can to bring him over. And Danny's just kind of like, I don't know. I guess it depends on if
let me put it to you this. Let me put it to you this way. This is now that I see where he's going with this, because I knew of the situation in Carolina. I didn't know what he was talking about by Danny's behavior, but I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
So I think the difference between the two is Don Waddle, very old school, very we run the show. It's the NHL. How dare anybody question us, challenge us, be a little bit more declarative in what we are going to do, because damn it, we're the National Hockey League. Whereas Danny Briere has kind of taken a little bit of a, let's respect the other league and the contract that exists in the other league. And he could say that publicly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's behind the scenes. Danny is a fierce competitor in this realm. So he's really good at putting on a unassuming face publicly, for lack of a better word. But
I mean, okay. So there's your difference. Now, there's a question that's been going on over in the chat. I love this question. And I threw it out as like a hypothetical the other day, and it's not going to happen. But Sinister asks, hey, Ant, will Demidov drop?
Nope.
There is no chance. However, let me spark a conspiracy theory. The Flyers have gotten Kolosov out. They've gotten Fedotov out. They may or may not be in the process of trying to get Matvei Michkov out. What if Demidov ghosts every team? We heard that around the Mishkov draft that he may or may not have ghosted Arizona. Now, Utah. Would he have changed? Maybe Mishkov would have enjoyed Utah. I don't know. Not if he likes coffee or alcohol or gambling. It doesn't matter. What if, this isn't going to happen, what if Demidov is just kind of like, you know what? I want to go to a team that has another young Russian stud on it, that I can grow with, that I can play with. And Demidov says, my only choice is the Philadelphia Flyers. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. First of all,
where's Demidov going to go? Where do you think? What number is Demidov going to go to?
They didn't get Kolosov out. Kolosov's Belarusian. It's a little bit different.
He played in the KHL. He got out of the KHL. Out of the KHL.
His contract was done. There was nothing special with that.
They got him out.
Okay. All right. Demidov's going to go top 5. Because I'm not 100% sure of how things are going to go after Celebrini going 1. I think there's a lot of volatility to this draft because it's not viewed as such a great draft. But I do think Demidov goes top 5. And for anyone who thinks, well, the Flyers got 2 draft picks, maybe they can package some stuff and move up if they need to go get. You're not getting that high with what you're packaging unless you're giving up a lot, right? And I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. The Chicago Blackhawks made a trade. I think it was, I don't know if it was last night or today, where they traded up 4 spots with the Islanders in both the first and second round. So 4 spots. It was all it took to move, and had to give up a second round pick to move up 4 spots at the back towards the back end of the rounds too, as well. I think they went from 20. Actually, I think it was 2 spots, 20 to 18. I think is what it was, right? And they had to give up a second round pick to go from 20 to 18. So, if that's what it takes to go up 2 spots at that point in the round, what would it take to go up 7 spots at the top of the round?
Take it all.
You'd have to give up both picks, swap picks in the first round, give up your other first round pick, probably give up a first round pick and a second round pick next year. Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
That's fine.
He's not worth it. It's not worth it.
That's fine. Maybe he is, though.
No.
But what if he is? Listen, my new theory, Ant, is if you can't draft the American and Canadian players, which it seems like Danny did a good job in the first draft. Okay, but let's just say hypothetically, historically, at least in the last decade, the Flyers haven't exactly been great with all of their draft picks, especially some high draft picks. I'm looking at Herman Rubtsov. If Demidov's good, you just take all the draft capital, as much as you're comfortable with, send it out. Just send it out. Who cares? Who cares, Ant? Assemble a Russian all-star team. Build a Russian all-star team and put them in orange and black. No one will notice. It's the new pipeline. They're just going to keep bringing all the young Russian guys over. I want to play nowhere except Philadelphia. It is metropolis. That's great. That's what we want. Okay, so Demidov, it's all done. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a shame, Ant, because if the Flyers had done what I think a lot of us hoped or thought they would last year, if they had been as bad of a team as many projected, they actually could have been in contention to potentially go after a Demidov. Maybe. And now they can't. But we'll see. Do you think it's more likely that they stand pat with the 2 picks going into this draft? And we're obviously projecting a few weeks away and we haven't done a ton of film study yet on these prospects. But would you say, just based on Danny Briere as the GM here, do you think they're more likely to make both of those picks, or could you see them packaging the 2 to move up a couple of spots?
I think there's a chance that they move
up or down.
Up. I just don't think it's going to. I just don't think it will be that high. I don't think you're going 12 to 5. I think Demidov could go as high as 2. In all honesty,
yeah, he could.
So I don't think you're going up there to get that kind of that player. Can they potentially move up to go get like Cole Yzerman? To me, is an interesting guy. Maybe ends up being a guy that's at a position that they already seem to have enough of. But I do know that they like him, and if maybe a guy like Yzerman is sliding down this draft. Right now I think he's kind of being looked at as maybe 9 or 10. Could I see them jumping from 12 to 8, maybe, or something like that, to try and go get a player like that who can come in and be another offensive-minded skill player? Yeah, I could see that, something along those lines. Another name that people talk about is T. Ginla. It was Jerome Ginla's kid. But I think he's jumping up the rankings a little bit. I'm not sure that they can get high enough to get him. Hellenius is the Finnish center. I know that they like him a lot. I'm not certain if he makes it to 12. I think he's a guy that probably goes in the top 10 as well. So, I think that there's a chance that they move up because they like a couple of names that are probably in that 8 to 10 range, 7 to 10 range, and they're at 12. So I think there's a chance they move up, but not high enough to get a Demidov. No.
Can we go to free agency really quick, and buyouts? Because there have been a few names that have been floated, and we haven't really gotten to dive into all this that much. And we certainly have an entire offseason to have fun with hypotheticals. But there have been growing murmurs and thoughts out there that Carolina might buy out Konecny. Could you see the Flyers maybe kick the tires on it? He's 23.
Yeah, but he's been a disappointment wherever he's been.
Well, I mean, in fairness, players being disappointments isn't anything new in the league, and he's still so young. Like, we still have people, like, in fairness, beginning of the year, we were talking about Morgan Frost, and there was kind of like the benching and the unbenching and like all that kind of stuff. And there were questions about, hey, could they potentially figure some things out, and would the other teams be interested? And there was the Pinto deal that was really a gamble that no one was willing to go all in on. No, nothing. Okay.
Oh no!
I thought
you had more to say there.
No, and so while the Flyers might have felt they were flush with talent, they had to play it straight and realize, all right, I'm done. But like, people were still talking about Frost. Kotkaniemi's younger, and if you're in this rebuild and you still don't have Stanley Cup aspirations for even the upcoming season, even Mishkov comes over, like, isn't that a guy that's at least worth taking a look at on the buyout market as somebody that you could potentially give a look? I mean, worst case, he flops here. I don't think there's that much remaining on that contract in terms of term. I know the money is a little bit high, but is it really that bad of an idea? Isn't this the exact kind of thing that you're looking for, is to buy low and find a gem? No?
Well, I mean, can you take a chance on a guy like that? It'd probably be, low risk, maybe high reward. I mean, sure. I mean, you could take a chance on a guy like that, but you shouldn't sit there and go, oh, we got to target Konecny. No, I don't. I think that there's another player in Carolina that might be of more interest to them who doesn't want to be there. I think that's a more intriguing name to me, also because it's a center, and that's Martin Necas. I think that's something that you might see the Flyers try and work with Carolina to see if that makes sense. He's 25, had a nice season, kind of wants out of Carolina. I think that's you're looking for somebody you do a hockey trade with. I think maybe Necas is a guy that could fit, right? So I think that's a little bit more realistic of a target. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. A lot of teams are, there's going to be other teams that are going to be interested in Necas as well, and it's going to really be what works out best for Carolina. But we'll see. I think that I think there are players on the Flyers who could get moved in hockey trades, and if they look at it and say, we can move this guy and bring in this guy.
So BJ Briere brings up the pie in the sky dream. That, in fairness, every single team. There are two names that are out there that aren't going to be. Well, at least one probably is almost impossible to see being moved. One is Draisaitl. If Edmonton can't afford him, you have to imagine they're going to move heaven and earth to extend him. I can't envision a scenario where they trade him.
Yeah, and a lot of that will really depend on how they finish here, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's going to be tough to move Draisaitl if you go to the Stanley Cup final and you win the Stanley Cup, or you get right on the doorstep, and you finally have got, broken through and gotten past the conference final, and, you have the two of the best players in the game, you're not going to just say, yeah, we missed our shot. Let's, let him go and we'll get somebody else and try it again. Like, I think you find a way to move heaven and earth to keep Draisaitl
and the other name that's out there is up in Toronto, but Tranel. But Mitch Marner, they're talking about. Well, I'm just saying that that's been another early exit for Toronto, another disappointing end to a season. Yeah. Mitch Marner is the name that you see. There have been a few people that have floated the idea that maybe Tavares could be dealt this offseason. They're going to have to. I have to imagine that if you're Toronto, you have to think about breaking up that core.
Well, they both have 1 year left on their contract, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do you make it give it one more shot with those guys? With Berube there coaching now, you give it one more run, and now that you got a guy who can probably. The best part about Berube going there is what makes Chief such a good coach is he gets a lot out of the guys who were further down the lineup, right? Yeah. So maybe you let your stars be your stars and let Chief figure out how to make the rest of that team play well enough to support those guys, and then take a run at it. I don't think they go anywhere without a goalie. I think goaltending is an issue for them. But I think that maybe they give it one more run with those big four. But we'll see. I mean, Marner's name is the one that keeps coming up, as could potentially get moved.
If they need a goalie, I know of an NHL goalie who how far is London from Toronto? Because you can't do that. We don't have to cross the border. Don't have to worry about. No? Okay.
No.
All right. So Marner's likely out. Draisaitl's likely out. There aren't really, if we're being honest, if you look at the free agent class, I guess if there's one positive you could take from it, you're not missing out on multiple generational stars hitting unrestricted free agency this year, where you're in a spot where you're well, we're not ready to compete yet, and you need to pitch a guy on hey, in a year or two, we might be ready. But there was somebody, and I've now scrolled past it, and it's going to take me too long to find it. But, we were talking about hypothetically packaging both first-round picks together to move up. What about using the Florida pick as a way to get another center in here, an impact center? I can't imagine that the Flyers would trade both first-round picks for a potential impact center, just given where they are on the timeline. But do you think it's possible they could look to move that later first-round pick in an effort to try to help this team if Mishkov does come over?
No, I don't see that happening. I think that they have a better chance of packaging it to move up in the draft. I don't think that they're looking to add players that are worth first round draft picks from other teams. I just don't see it happening. Again, you might see hockey trades, player for player. I don't see the Flyers giving up on high draft picks this year or next year for players in the league that are worth first round draft picks. It's just not. I don't see it happening because they're not close enough yet. I think that that's something you might consider 2 years from now, but certainly not this year or next year. I think that they want to use these draft picks for players in these drafts.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit before. We haven't talked about this on the show, but Berube did get a job. It's not here. He didn't go to Jersey. He went to Toronto. Rod Brindamore, who's another guy that a lot of Flyers fans had interest in, and you kind of poo-pooed the rumors a few weeks ago about it probably just being a negotiating tactic in the media about there not being a legitimate offer, all that.
Yeah.
He ends up re-upping in Carolina. If there's anybody out there who thought John Tortorella's not going to be the coach next year, those were two potential names that this organization could have back-channeled with. And they have not gone that way. And so I guess we come back around to what Dan Hilferty said on the show, that the people who were here are going to remain here. Tort said in that final press conference of the year that they're going to look at some different options, but he thinks that the assistant coaches will be back. But they're going to take a look at having some other people involved, I guess with the power play and with some other things. But he wasn't going to demote anyone, and he wasn't going to move them off of their roles from last year. Do you expect anything different?
No, I don't. At this point, nothing's going to change there. You would have seen a change by now if in fact that was going to happen. So it's not. I mean, I think what you got is what you got. That's what's going to be on the bench next year.
Yeah. By the way, we had a super chat from our friend Trevor T from the 203. Said glad to have you guys back. I've had a lot of people very kind in the comments saying that it was like having old friends come back to them as we're here in this longer format, which is funny because at an hour, Instagram Live cuts. So if you're watching on Instagram Live, go over to YouTube. I didn't mention this before. I do need people to understand something, okay? And I know that I am mostly the one that's annoying about this, but like I promise that it does matter. When we talk about the importance of hitting the like button on YouTube, the impact it has is absolutely insane. And so we can see across all platforms how many people have checked in on Twitter, where there have been like 800 people that have checked in across a few accounts. Actually, no, it's more than 800. We're over 1,300 now total. Facebook, that number, I think a lot of people who used to watch us on Facebook have now moved over to YouTube. But YouTube's kind of the place to be where you get to interact with the polls, all that kind of stuff. But if you hit the like button, it really genuinely does help people find this show. Maybe not this episode specifically, but helps them find this channel. And as we are the only Flyers podcast, you as a Flyers fan are effectively helping somebody to find, oh my God, there is a podcast in this area that covers the Philadelphia Flyers. So who knew? I always say this in jest. For the new people who don't know the bit, it's a bit. It's okay. Just kidding. Okay? I don't need any angry comments or any angry messages on Twitter about, you realize there are other people who do Flyers stuff. I get it. It's a bit, guys. It's been like 7 years of this. But if you haven't done so, hit the like button. It really does help us. I mentioned at the start the Joy Media YouTube account. It's funny because the one video ended up having 1,600 views or something. But part of why that video did as well as it did is because 57 people liked the video. Now, somebody explained to me why 57 human beings would go out of their way to like that video, but we wouldn't have 57 or more here on Snow the Goalie's channel for this episode right now. Hit that like button. There you go. I've now made my pitch. Andrew Fawcett with a very interesting question. Super chat. Thank you, Andrew. Will the Flyers qualify redacted? Will they qualify their former starting goalie who is mired in quite the legal situation north of the border? What do you think is going to happen there?
I do not think they will qualify him.
Which will mean he will become a UFA?
Yes. Yes. I don't think any of those players are going to get qualified. Not a one by their teams. So
I don't disagree. It is crazy. You think about where the season started and the conversation about would they move a goalie? Jonesy on this show last summer saying you have to make sure you have a guy who's like a top 3 goalie to invest significant money. He would rather go after a number 1 D than a number 1 goalie. And that whole conversation's just gone.
Well, you know what the funny part about it is like we kind of all anticipated that the announcement that came mid-season was coming
last
summer.
Yeah.
And like we talked about it, like we were kind of trying to lead people into this conversation. Like we didn't say it specifically, but we kept hinting at it. We kept talking about it. Like this is coming, guys. It's going to happen because we knew. I mean, we knew Carter was caught up in this thing.
Redacted.
And the fact that they had to go into the season before it happened, the NHL really botched that, right? But it really put the Flyers in a difficult spot too, because now they prepared all off season for it to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and then they don't know. Like they don't know when it's going to happen, and they got to keep playing him because they're paying the guy. He's on the roster. They got to keep playing him, and he's winning games, and he's making the team look better than they probably were. And you know that was tough. That was a tough spot for the Flyers to be in. So, really, if you really take it into consideration, they did the best that they could with all that was going on around them, and they just they don't want to have to deal with that any longer. It's been enough of a headache for as long as it's been a headache. Just move on. Yeah. They won't sign him to a qualifying offer.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. So he gone. All right. Okay. BJ brings up a question. We're going to go back to conspiracy theories. You ready for conspiracy theory, Ant?
Yeah, well, I kind of threw this out there when I went on Nasty Knuckles a couple weeks back, but go ahead.
BJ throws out conspiracy. Is the reason Fedotov's contract so healthy? Some people argued it was a little bit more than they expected. Is it so healthy because the agent, who is also Mishkov's agent, uses the bloated cut of his agent cut of that contract to help pay for Mishkov's termination? In theory, as a third party who is not affiliated with the Flyers, nor St. Petersburg, could he potentially have negotiated a deal and then he takes his cut and then he puts it together with some of Mishkov's cut and then like the Russian market somewhere in like Port Richmond or something. I don't know where the Russian people live in Philly, but they put together something for like a fish market or something. And then everybody just they cobble some money together. There's a GoFundMe, the whole thing, and Mishkov can pay his way out of his deal.
It's possible. I mean, when you think about it, anything's possible. When you think about it, right? You're the agent. You get a little bit extra there. You got to give it right back up because you got to go pay to give it to Mishkov to help him get out of his deal. But then you're going to sign a new deal with Mishkov with the Flyers, so you're going to get that money anyway, rather than waiting 2 years to have to get that contract. You're basically going to get that money now. So it's beneficial to the agent. It benefits two of his clients. The agent makes more money in the short term and doesn't have to wait 2 years. So it all kind of makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's some really interesting way of going about it. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened here, but is it possible? Sure. I want to bring this up because Eric Schmidt's mentioned it a couple times. TK not getting $10 million a year. TK will probably get that, if not even a little bit more. I think he's probably going to be in that 10.5 range ultimately, and I'm pretty sure it'll be with the Flyers. They can't sign him until after July 1, but I think that's coming.
What was that last part you said?
I think that's coming. That contract is coming. He's going to sign with the Flyers, and it'll probably be in that 10.5 range.
Sorry, bad manners. We love Travis Konecny. All right. And the Philadelphia fan base loves Travis Konecny. $10.5 million is insane.
It's going to be the going rate, man.
It is a great contract for a team that is on the precipice of doing something in the playoffs. It's a great deal for a rebuilding Philadelphia Flyers team. I don't see it.
If you give him,
they might do it. I mean, listen. In fairness, the Flyers have overpaid other guys in the past. We'll stand resolute that the Nick Seeler deal, while he's a wonderful player, he didn't look the same after Walker was moved, and I still think that was an overpay. Fine.
If you
$10.5 million,
if you give him seven,
Travis Konecny,
let's say you give him 7 years with the AAV at $10.5 million, right? What do you think players of his ilk are going to be making 4 or 5 years from now?
Don't care, because this is the same kind of argument that you made about Rasmus Ristolainen.
If you're not going to be good until 3 years from now, right?
He'll be 30.
Okay. But he's still in his prime. I mean, it's not like you turn 30 and all of a sudden you suck, right? I mean, so he's still in his prime at 30. What is a player who puts up 75 points a season worth with the salary cap going up and up and up and up each year? It's going to be worth that. It just is. And people are going to say it's insane now. And if you're looking at it right now compared to what other people make, you're right. It seems insane. But the reality of it is, when you sign a long-term deal, the reason you're signing a long-term deal is not for the fact that you're overpaying now, but for the fact that the money against your cap down the line is actually going to be good for the team. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. That's the reason why it is. That's why you look at. You could sit there and say he's a streaky player. You could sit there and say, he's not a top line guy. He's a second line guy. Fine. You could say all those things. But the reality of it is, we bookmark this conversation, and then
please, somebody, one of you
bookmark this conversation.
Please, we'll clip this.
And then 3-4 years from now, let's bring it back up and see what guys that have his production are making around the league, and you'll see it'll be this price, and they'll be like, oh, okay. Yes, again, and again, sinister. And only one team has won a cup paying a player $10 million. You're right. But you also got to remember the last 4 years.
How much is the cap going up? That is like when you say it's going to keep going up and up and up every year. We've had multiple years of flat cap.
Yeah.
How much of a jump is there going to be next year and the year after and the year after? Because they've already negotiated the TV contract, so it's not like you have exponential money coming in off of that. So
you're going up a few $1 million a year. They owe the players. The players went for 4 years without a real cap increase.
You're expecting the NHL owners to say, mea culpa, guys. We'll fix this.
They have to. They're going to have to, because it's based off the revenues. It's all a mathematical equation. They have to do it. So, You
and I always see very different landscapes. And I don't know what it is, because you're the older one. You're supposed to caution me against irrational and reckless spending. But it's almost like you're the guy who feels the money burning a hole in his pocket and says, I have to spend this. And while I totally understand your idea of like, hey, in 3 years, that $10 million cap hit is going to be a smaller percentage of the cap. And that is fine, and that is fair, and that is just. I just come back around to, I think he's a really good player. I don't know if he's a really good player on a cup contending team.
So my point is then, if you ultimately have to move away from Travis Konecny, right now he's part of your team and part of your core. He's part of your leadership group. You think he can be a guy that can be there for your team when you're competitive. But if for some reason something like that changes over the course of time, the team is a little slower in developing, you don't get to where you want to get to, and you need to make some changes, moving that contract becomes easier because it's value for what the player is in his role around the league. Mm-hmm. That's why it's important to do that, rather than try and lowball him and then you don't get what you want out of the guy, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, do we really want to take on that contract? You know what I'm saying? Like you're not going longer term. It's going to be shorter term. Nobody's going to want to go. So let's just say, for example, let's just play this game, and I'll get to Vinny's question in a minute. But let's just say the Flyers say, screw that. We're not giving him $10.5 million. He's only worth about $8 million. Let's say he's only worth $8.5 million. But then the pushback from TK and his agency is going to be, well, then if that's what we have to settle for, we don't want a long-term deal. We want something short-term. So now they ask for 3 or 4 years. Okay. And that might sound great to you, right? It might sound great. Okay. But the fact of the matter is someone going to take that contract off your hands in 2 years because it doesn't quite fit your timeline any longer? And it's like, well, do we really want to pay that guy, at this point? And then he's going to leave because we don't have control, because he's going to be a free agent. And then, now we're going to trade for him. Okay, maybe we trade for him for a year, but then he's going to re-sign somewhere else. But if you have that you have that certainty on his contract, and that those years of control on a player like that, even if it's a little bit higher price, it's more valuable to the team. And so that's why you pay him, you give him a higher AAV. That's why it works out that way. Now,
so my very simple contention on this is as follows. I am fine conceptually with saying, hey, we think that Travis Konecny can be a 30-plus goal scorer for the next 5 years, but we value him at 8. And it doesn't matter what the market might be in a few years. We value him at 8. He will be worth some draft capital. He'll be worth some capital of some sort. And it's not like he just goes away and that's it. Like, they would get something back, presumably of value for him. And then I would look and say, like, look, if you do think that you're 2 or 3 years away, I'd rather see them get more things that they can use to hopefully put themselves in position, whether it is a draft pick that they intend on using or a draft pick that's for 2 years down the line that they can package together with some other assets and go after a guy that is more ready and that they think has a higher ceiling at that time. That's where I'm at. I think that if they re-sign Travis Konecny to $8.5, $9 million, you probably say, okay, and your case is totally fine. I don't like the idea of locking a guy up super long-term at $10 million, because he could just as easily prove that, like, around that age 30 season in 3 years, that, you know what, smaller guys, he plays a certain way, there's a diminishing return, and then you still have 4 years left, and he's no longer a 30-goal scorer, and then you go, this wasn't a great deal. I think he brings a lot. I think he brings good intangibles. I think he's a well-liked guy. Teams hate playing against him, all that. But I do think that at some point you have to make a determination. Are we going for it or are we not? Because if you're not, it does give you the wiggle room to say, hey, we're going to offer what we're going to offer. And if we can't come to a deal, this is still a very good player. And there are a lot of teams that would love to go out and get a 30-goal scorer and might actually give you assets that you could parlay together to go get something in a couple of years that is also a known commodity. It's not, I know you and I usually disagree because you think like, oh, Russ, you want these draft picks and you know what they're going to become. If you have multiple firsts in the 2026 draft and there's a guy who's available like a Marner level guy who falls out of favor or a team is ready to move on from and they want to get younger, they want to get cheaper, there's your moment. Like these guys come available every year. That's where I'm at. Maybe I'm wrong. I couldn't. You and I can disagree on it, and people in the comments are kind of going back and forth on who they think is right or wrong. But I feel like the Flyers too often put themselves in these positions where they go and they sign guys to long deals with the thought that like, hey, it's gonna pay dividends. When is the last time the Flyers signed a guy to a long-term contract and didn't regret it? Like didn't actively put themselves in a position where they have to try to eat money or like significant money on the back end of that deal? I can't think of one.
Mm-hmm. What did they just sign Owen Tippett for?
8 years, right? Was it 864?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it was?
Is Travis Konecny's not worth what Owen Tippett's worth? Is that what we're saying? Is that where we're at?
He can be worth an extra million. Well, if Jake Gensel is in conversations about having an 8x8 contract with Carolina, admittedly, he is 2 years older, but an $8 million cap hit, I don't know. I probably would think that that's a stupid idea to sign him to as long of a deal as that as is being rumored there as well. So I'm not a total hypocrite here. I'm not so sure, dude. Like that's my point.
Tippett cap hit is 6.2 per year. Is what his cap hit is.
And he's 2 years younger, but he isn't a given quality. Like we know what Konecny is, and Tippett had some good runs, but you don't know.
Right.
That's fair. I will concede that.
Konecny's a two-time All-Star.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Everybody gets an
comes.
No, he's good. He's a good player. He is a good player. I'm being
There's
facetious.
a lot of teams that would like Travis Konecny. And he's making.
Could you get a bidding war going? Hold on. Like, could you in theory get a bidding war going though, asset-wise for him?
Why would you want to risk that?
I'm saying if the Flyers and his agent agree that they're not in the same ballpark, could you theoretically get seriously, like if there are 4 or 5 teams that actively would love to go get a 30-goal scoring Travis Konecny, like wouldn't it finally put the Flyers in position to like have something of legitimate value to put on the trade market? Like even when they traded Giroux, there were a few teams, but
you have something with legitimate value to put on the trade market, and it's a guy making basically the same money as Konecny, and he's 3 years younger. Just hasn't put up the numbers that Konechny's put up, and it's Joel Farabee. That's the guy that if you're going to move somebody, that's the guy that I think is going to get moved, right? That you're going to move Farabee and get some value. I don't know. We should get to. By the way, we have Vinit's super chat. You had it up on the screen and then it disappeared.
I'll pull it up. I do think, and you know what? And I think this is about as nice of a back and forth as you and I have had in quite a while. You know, and we've remained civil. Good for us. Maybe it's because we're getting older. Maybe it's because you're getting married this year. I don't know.
That's the reason why.
But maybe you're getting soft in old age. Like I don't know. But you know. All right, here we go. So Vinit said LeBron said Gensel is in the talks about the 8x8 paying Konecny over $9 million a year would be the worst move ever by Danny Briere. They're stacked at right wing.
But are they stacked? Are they stacked? I mean, that's what I keep going back to. They have, is it the position that they probably have the most players, right? But who are your right wings? You have Owen Tippett, who like we just talked about, right? And you have Konecny. Okay, they're going to buy out Cam Atkinson, right?
Are they?
Yeah, I can't imagine that I can't imagine anybody's going to want a $5.875 million cap hit of Cam Atkinson next year at 34 years old. He's cooked, he's toast. They're going to probably buy that out and get a little bit of cap relief, right? And you got Forster, okay, but Tyson Forster, nice player. But is Tyson Forster a superstar, or is everybody just falling in love with Tyson Forster because he's 22 and is a prospecty type player who had a really nice rookie campaign, right? Like, so
Maybe.
where are you stacked at right wing? That's what I don't get. And to me, it's like, okay, Konecny is currently your best right wing. What's behind him is not as good as he is. And so therefore to sit there and say we have all this other room to get, we have more guys at this position. Yeah, you have more NHL caliber players, but I don't think you have players as good as Travis Konecny at right wing in this, in your lineup, in your system. It's just not there. I don't know. To me, it's foolish to constantly be trading away talented players and retool. You're going back to the same old stuff over and over again with let's hope the young players develop. Let's hope this young guy develops. Let's hope this. You gotta have some veterans on the roster who are good players. Like if they're still in a rebuild and they are rebuilding and they're doing it what I believe is the right way. Okay. But you're going to need players like Konecny to be part of that when you're good again. You don't just suddenly have superstars that are growing. Like, I mean, all right, we think Mishkov's going to be a star player. Who else in this system, who else in this Flyers organization currently is going to be a superstar type player? You don't have one. Who's going to be a superstar? Yeah. You don't have one. Okay. Yep. So while it's going to take time to continue to draft, hopefully get another guy like that or whatever and develop that player. Okay, fine. You need good players if you're going to be competitive. So who are your good players, really good players? That's Travis Konecny. If you trade him for a draft pick or trade him for a prospect, you're crossing your fingers and hoping that those players that you're trading him for become something that's better than what he currently is. But it's also down the line. It's also way down the line. You can't,
or you package them. That's why I feel like you have this like binary look at it, and like there is actually a third path, which is you take those assets and you put them together and you do go after a given commodity. I feel like that's like the one thing that we just like never acknowledge.
You can't go after a given commodity until you have the pieces in place to go after that commodity. That's what Jonesy has been saying since our first.
But then it's really not that different though. Like if it's Konecny at 10 million, so just play this out. 2 years from now.
Yeah.
2 years from now, they have Travis Konecny at 10 million. No, go 3. So he'll be 30. He plays the style he plays. He will probably have a few injuries between now and 3 years from now.
Well, I mean, look,
I'm being fair. I'm not saying he's going to like miss a season. I'm not saying like he's going to become a 15 goal scorer, but at his size, the style he plays 3 years from now, not the best. Even if he puts up 30 goal seasons, great. All right, so that's where you are. At that point, if you're right about that contract being a bargain and all that, then you know, I guess in theory you could make a call at that point. You're probably going to roll with him, but in theory you could potentially entertain if you haven't developed or drafted enough guys that are top level, then you say, hey, now we sell high at 30. Okay, it's entirely possible. The other version of this is you do move those pieces out and you say that like, hey, 3 years from now, when you have the assets that you've accumulated over time, again, if there's like a Marner-ish kind of guy available, because it happens every offseason, maybe there's a guy that you think has higher upside and you're able to actually address that position, whatever the position is that you need at that point, because you feel like, all right, we have enough of these guys ready at that point. Like, I don't know. They don't have a 1C. They don't have a 1D. The goalie situation, while it was positive for a good chunk of the season with Sam Ersson, there are questions there. And I think that even with Fedotov, there are going to be questions.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant to me right now about goaltending because they have a lot of young guys that are goalies, and goalies take a little bit of time to develop. You have 4 guys in your system that you can take a chance on. I know Fedotov's older.
Sure.
and I'm not certain that he's going to be the guy. I mean, but someone between Urson and Kolosov and Zvragan and who's the other one that they drafted? Why am I forgetting his name?
I don't remember his name either.
Canadian kid. Oh, geez. Why am I forgetting his name?
Not Bjornsson. I forget.
Yeah, Carson Bjarnason. That's it. Thank you.
See that?
Yes. Yes.
Russ, the Rustache reached far and wide, pulled up elite prospects without using hands, just reached into the internet, interwove itself in the World Wide Web, and pulled that name out like a tooth that had been rotted and decayed from years of terrible dental hygiene.
My point is that they have a lot of prospects that are going to be developing at that position, right? And you only need one of them to hit. So they taking a chance on a lot of them. If one of them hits, then it's a success. But you're right. They don't have a number one center. They don't have a number one defenseman. They got to go in for those types of players first. And then when you do, either Travis Konecny is still playing to the level that can be conducive to working with them at a salary that will be appropriate for that type of player at that time, or you have not achieved what you've wanted to do and get those players. And then you trade Travis Konecny at a contract that is acceptable to other players or to other teams for that player. So I think that's why you sit there until you do it, because it gives them control over a veteran player who's good. I mean, to me, it makes sense. To me, it makes a lot of sense.
We just have different views, and that's okay. And that's the comments section in this video right now, especially on YouTube, is a very wonderful place right now. It's not a bitter, contentious place. People are having a legitimate back and forth about it. That is the beauty. I know that we do the whole thing, right? This is why I value the people who watch the show live and then the people who listen back in the podcast feed and interact on Twitter and everything. There are a lot of people who genuinely care. This is the best part of this, and is they are no closer to winning a cup right now than they were a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago, right? But there are people who still care. And for all of the things that we said about this past season, right? And there were many things that we said. People have gotten back in on this team. And despite the fact that it is clear they are many moves away from being a cup contender, people care. And they have their differing opinions, but they're doing it in a good way over on YouTube, where, by the way, people should be hitting that like button more.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the playoffs really quick before we head out? Because this has gone longer than I think you and I thought it was going to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Conference Finals underway. You and I both stayed up and watched the game last night. Went to double OT. 32 seconds in, Connor McDavid on a redirect. Bingo, bango, bongo. Great goal. Would be remiss if we didn't point out the fact that Ottinger had the save of the playoffs, maybe, on an empty net on McDavid in the first overtime. I know you picked Dallas to win the cup. Obviously, it's just one game. Dallas scored late in regulation to force overtime. In theory, the Oilers have now flipped home ice advantage in their favor. Where do you land right now? Are you impressed with what Edmonton did last night? Do you still stand by the idea that Dallas is still the favorite? Where are you at?
I still think Dallas wins the series. They lost the first game, the first two rounds, and came back and won both of those against teams that I think were better all-around teams than Edmonton for the playoffs. Obviously, Edmonton's got more skill, more offense, but both Vegas and Colorado were better all-around teams, and Dallas came back and won both those series. I think they were a little rusty in that game. I think that they'll be fine. I think they're the best team in the playoffs right now. I've been saying it all along. I'm not worried about it. Maybe that series goes a game longer now than it should have, but I still think that that's a Dallas win. I'll go with Dallas in 6. Florida is going to beat the Rangers, and I think that one could end in 5. They were so good in game 1 against the Rangers at MSG. So good. And I think that's, what I love about Dallas and Florida and the way they play this is exactly what I've been pushing and saying and screaming about on this show for several years. That if you put the right team together with a lot of good players, you don't need the super duper duper stars to win. You can. I'm not saying you can't, but you don't have to just sit there and keep shooting for the 1-star player or the 2-star players. And while some teams have done that with success, Pittsburgh being an example, Chicago being an example, right? There are also teams that do it without going that route. All right. St. Louis and Vegas are two that of more recent years that have done it. And I think you're seeing it right now with Dallas and with Florida. They have great players. They got first-round picks, that are contributing on these teams, but they're not first or second overall guys. Just not. That to me, it's a thing, right? And so that's why I really want to see both of these teams succeed, because it shows the point that I'm trying to make. That you do not need a 7 to 10 year rebuild and cross your fingers and hope you get that first overall pick. Does it help? Sometimes it does. But if Edmonton doesn't go to the Stanley, if Edmonton doesn't go to the Stanley Cup final, you're a decade into Connor McDavid and not reaching a final. I mean, best player in the game hasn't reached a final, right? So my point is that you can find players that work and a team that works a certain style of play and get there without having those superstar players. I mean, I look at these teams, and their names are being mentioned in the comments, and they're spot on. The guys like the Wyatt Johnstons of the world and the Sam Bennett's of the world. It's just really, really good teams. And yes, BJ, I put this up, and this is huge. And Jonesy even talked about this. St. Louis and Vegas had very solid blue lines in their runs. Don't forget, same guy on both teams. Okay. That was Alex Pietrangelo. Yeah. Anyway, point being that you really can win a different way. And that's why I love the way Dallas plays, and I love the way that that Florida plays. They just come at you and they bring it, and they're relentless, and it's nonstop, and it doesn't have to be with superstar talent. And they have
it's a shame that the Flyers didn't have the chance to draft Heiskanen. It's a shame. He was off the board.
I hope people are enjoying watching him, because he's kind of been the forgotten guy, because he went, because Makar was also drafted in that draft, right?
Yeah. But the scouts,
Flyer scouts wanted Heiskanen, and you're seeing what they really like about him. If you're watching these games, really, really good defenseman, really good defenseman.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
there's part of me that wonders if New York has a chance. Like I still think that New York has a chance in that series. I do.
They're good, but they're just not. They're not. The point is,
Florida and Dallas in a cup final would be interesting.
I think
that if you're the league, though, obviously you want McDavid.
New York
in
New York first,
and I think you want McDavid. I think that New York against McDavid is really the best case scenario for the NHL and for revenue, but it's entirely possible, maybe even likely, that it's going to be the inverse. And I don't know if a Dallas and Florida Stanley Cup final moves the needle significantly.
It wouldn't.
I tend to think that it wouldn't, but it would be very good for it could be a great series
for hockey fans, for existing hockey fans who will watch the Stanley Cup regardless of who's in it. Dallas and Florida would be the best matchup.
By the way, Moose 82 with a great thing here. If I'm the Flyers, I'm trying to get Sam Reinhart. Age is okay. He changed the attack big time. And you can go to bat for me right here. When Reinhart was available, that was a name I brought up on this show and said, figure your shit out. That's the guy to go after. And if you remember at the time, he was playing for Buffalo. And it was the same offseason. Wasn't that the same offseason that Eichel was traded to Vegas? Am I crazy? I feel like it was the same. Or it was within 6 months. We can look. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was within like 6 months. And I kept coming up with like, hey, in theory, Eichel, if he gets the surgery, if he returns to form, if he blah, 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 very high upside. But Reinhart was kind of like this undervalued guy. And he's been very good for them. He's been integral to their success. So, Bill
I mean,
Zito. Anyway,
yeah.
let's but is there anything else you wanted to get to? I was actually going to plug something of yours.
Do we have
before
some
leave.
5 stars?
I don't know. Do we? My kids are about to come busting through the door.
I love it.
Do we have a 5-star review?
I'm
think
asking.
We might have.
I'm just asking. I
think we might have. There's a good chance. It's been a while, and the site that we pull from that gets us not just the U.S. based ones, changed over. They changed the whole back end of their site. Let me look here real quick, and I'm in there now. I was gonna plug something though of yours that I thought you'd be happy to have plugged, but if you're not up for it, then I guess we can
plug something of mine.
I was going to. Yeah, I was going to be a nice guy today. I'm a nice guy. Some people tell me I'm a nice guy. I don't know. Not a lot.
I'll be on the Fantastic Sports Show tonight on Fox 29.
Will you? You're like Jamie Apodi.
Although I'll say stuff. She didn't say anything on that thing.
I think there are legal reasons that she didn't say anything.
She's not allowed. I'm not blaming her.
So
I will say some stuff.
I don't think we had any new ones. We had a lot of Lee C reviews. We had Gritty's Biggest Fan at the end of March. Did we read that one? 5 stars. One of, if not the best silly podcasts I've ever listened to. Thank you for blessing my ears with this masterpiece. Signed Andy from Ontario. If we didn't read that one, thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
A lot of Lee C 5-star reviews. So do us a favor, friends. Even if you watch on YouTube, go over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating. That's helpful. But the review is really what helps to push us up the charts and helps more people find the show. Now I'm going to get to the thing that I was going to promote, Anthony. There was one person in the comments who said that they hope that you don't tweet again until Mishkov comes over because they don't want to see you tweeting about the Phillies. And I was actually going to take the opportunity right now to promote your Phillies show that you do that has a new episode out right now, Crossed Up. You can go over to the Crossing Broad YouTube channel and you can go find Crossed Up with Ant, Big Bet Bob Wankel, breaking down all your Phillies news.
Is that what you were doing during that whole rant that I was going on?
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to all of it. I was trying to get this pulled up for you because I wanted to promote you.
I love when you are constantly doing other work and not paying attention to what we're talking about.
That's exactly right. That's what I'm here for. It's not just my good looks and my mustache. All right? So anyway, if you haven't done so already, you can go over there and find it. It's also wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can go over. I mentioned this at the start of the show. But you go over. Why is that? Oh, I know why. Hold on. Let's take that one down. That was the one that we were just looking at. Hold on a second. Now I got it. I got to do this thing again. You can go find Crossed Up over on Apple Podcasts and Pandora and Spotify, wherever you get.
We had a great interview with Phillies reliever Jeff Hoffman.
You did. It was very good.
On the next to last episode.
And then I brought this up earlier. You go over to the Joy Media account where there have been subscribers pouring in. And if you're looking for your hockey fix in between us doing new episodes, you can go over there sometimes. Drop a little bit about Mishkov, sometimes about the Sixers, maybe a little bit of Phillies, maybe a little bit of national sports stories. So if you haven't done so, go over there and subscribe to that channel. And we are branching out. We're continuing to do what we do best, which is provide people with content. I don't know if we're content creators quite yet, but we're getting there.
Trying.
We're getting there.
Trying.
We're doing our thing. So if you support us with this show, which we love and we appreciate, support the other stuff that we're doing as well. Bundy, of course, you can go over to bundyrecovery.com. If you know somebody who needs help, remember, help is just one phone call away. Go over to bundyrecovery.com. He's out there, like we said, he's out on, he's out on assignment today. So he's out there doing really good stuff. So Andrew Fawcett also says, how's the sermon prep, Rev Russ? I can tell you, I have not begun the sermon yet. Not even started it. I have no idea. So Moose also asks, says, I don't know what you're feeding that mustache, but it looks like you should be asking for my license and registration, so keep up the good work. Hopefully, if I ever did such a thing, I wouldn't say that I was dragged 30 yards. Did you see the Scheffler video that came out yesterday?
I did see the video.
Pretty wild stuff, Anthony. Didn't look like a dragon to me. Maybe it was on the other side of the car or underneath it. I don't know. But anyway, doesn't matter. We're going to head out. A big thank you to everybody who checked in on the show live on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, formerly now Twitter. The whole domain's changed, so now it's X. Make sure you head over to shop.snowthegoalie.com to pick up some merch. We had a few people out of nowhere just buy up a bunch of That Silly Podcast shirts yesterday. So Big thank you to those people.
Mishkov Mania.
Mishkov Mania is available over at shop.snowthegoalie.com. It's a great shirt. You should consider going to buy it. In the meantime, make sure you leave a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button. Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating and a 5-star review. A big thank you to everybody who tuned in, and those who listen after the fact in the podcast feed. For Ant, I'm Russ. For Bundy, who's on assignment, thanks for listening to, maybe even watching, Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We'll be back probably next week with a new episode, unless Mishkov Mania starts running wild. Talk soon.